In this video, we're going to be introducing one-point perspective as a way of drawing in 3 dimensions. Previously in this series, we've looked at oblique drawing techniques and isometric drawing techniques. This outline sketch of a row of houses using the oblique technique doesn't quite look right, especially as you go off into the distance. And that's because our brain tells us as these houses go off into the distance, they should start to appear smaller. This is where perspective drawing differs from the other techniques. It takes into account that objects in the foreground actually do appear larger than the ones in the distance. When producing a perspective drawing, our first stage is to mark out where our horizon is. The horizon is where our eye level is when looking at the object. So we're going to start by drawing a horizon across the middle of our page. This is a construction line which will be erased at the end of the drawing, so it needs to be drawn in a nice lightweight pencil line. Somewhere along the horizon, we need to mark out our vanishing point. I've put our vanishing point for this drawing in the middle of our horizon. Once we've set up our horizon and our vanishing point, much like oblique drawing, the first stage of one-point perspective is to draw the front face of our object. In this case, our rectangle. We're then going to take the nearest 3 corners of our rectangle and connect them back to our vanishing point. Hopefully now you can see that it looks like our extremely long cuboid is disappearing off into the distance. Now in this case we don't want our cuboid to be that long, so we're going to use lines that are parallel with the vertical and horizontal lines on our front face to cut off our cuboid about here. I'm then going to go over with stronger lines the lines I wish to keep. Because we've drawn our cuboid below our eye level, we can see the top surface, and because it's slightly to the left, we can see the right-hand surface along with the front surface, as we would in reality. So perspective drawing takes into consideration the viewpoint in which we are looking from. So if we're looking from below the object, you'll see the base and the side and the front, and not the top. So unlike isometric and oblique drawing, perspective drawing considers how objects will appear differently from different viewpoints and from different distances away. A common and useful way of drawing in one-point perspective and practicing the techniques for the first time is to draw a one-point perspective street scene. So we're going to give this a go. So if we start by drawing our horizon across the middle of a page and selecting somewhere in the middle for our vanishing point. I don't want to be looking down on our street scene, so I want to imagine we're looking at it from an eye level that is level with an upstairs window or a top deck of a double-decker bus. So we're using the middle of our page, and we're going to draw the front face of our first building, bearing that in mind. So if you imagine our horizon is level with where maybe the upstairs windows would be. Then in the same way as we did with our cuboid, we're going to bring the nearest 3 corners back to our vanishing point with construction lines. We're then going to add details such as doors and windows in the same way. So we're going to draw construction lines that come from our vanishing point and then line our windows and doors up with that. So not only will the windows and doors appear to get shorter as they go off into the distance, but we need to remember that they will also appear to get closer together. We can then add some upstairs windows in the same way, and then get rid of our construction lines, then start to add some details on those windows and doors. Then I'm going to run a pavement down the outside of our terrace, obviously making sure it disappears off to the vanishing point in the same way. So I've got one side of my street drawn. I'm now going to outline some taller buildings, just for variety, on the opposite side of my street, making sure everything obviously lines back up to my vanishing point in exactly the same way. Your buildings can obviously look however you want them to look, but once I'm happy with my drawings in construction lines, I'm going to go over them in a darker pencil so I can see them over the construction lines. As I talked about in my oblique demo video, crating is a way of making more complex shapes out of basic blocks by adding them together and then adding the detail afterwards. So we're going to start creating some blocks that are going to represent cars and vans going up and down this road. We can then erase any lines in behind those and start to add the detail afterwards of those cars and vans. Then delete our blocks, our crates afterwards. We can then maybe add some pedestrians, making sure that we use construction lines going back to our vanishing point so that the height of them is correct as they get smaller off into the distance. I can add my finishing details and then remove all of my construction lines for my final 1-point perspective street scene.